This is a really challenging one: how to parent a young adult with anger management issues. I'll give you 4 powerful strategies that will help you to do this. Stick around for number 4 because I'll talk to you about the biggest mistake that parents usually make. I've been a psychologist for now 30 years, which blows me away because I don't feel that old. But I've learned something really important. It's about stage, not age. What I mean by that is that your young adult is at some stage of moral development. There's 3. These 3 stages are important to understand as we try to figure out what strategies to employ when we're working with a young adult who has anger management issues. And that already tips me off to what stage they might be on. Here's a quick summary for you. Stage 1, selfish, self-centered, immature, demanding, yelling and screaming, refusing to cooperate. Sound familiar? This is stage 1, and it requires a very specific style of parenting. To cover the other 2 really quickly, stage 2 is about cooperation. At stage 2, they're willing to communicate with you in a rational way. They're willing to work something out. They don't want any trouble. They want to keep the peace. Yeah, you're already thinking, yeah, that's not my kid. Okay, but notice that there's a big difference between stage 1 and stage 2. Stage 3 is the highest stage of moral development. This stage is characterized by responsibility and taking initiative and having empathy, which I think is a dual meaning here. Empathy is that you understand and care how someone else feels. That kicks in at stage 3. At stage 3, they're being responsible. They're taking care of things. They're paying their way. Now, if you've got a young adult who's on stage 3, you're probably not watching this video. If they're on stage 2, you're dealing with things. If they're on stage 1, you probably saw this title and you thought, yep, I need that. Because anger management issues are characteristic of stage 1 moral development. Now, this is important because the parent's job at any of those 3 stages depends on which stage your kid is on, or in this case, your young adult. At stage 1, we have to use consequences. I'll refer back to that in some of the other points. At stage 2, we kick into communication mode. This is where you can negotiate. You can work it out with them. At stage 3, you become a consultant. And that's where your kids come to you and ask for your sagely advice. And when you share it with them, they go away with appreciation and take care of their own 5 kids. Now, it can happen before them, but that's just an illustration of what stage 3 maturity is all about. So we're probably talking about stage 1. Once they move to stage 2, we shift our strategy. I'll be focusing mostly in this video on stage 1. How do we parent a young adult who's got these anger management issues and they're on stage 1? For the second tip, it's really important once you understand what stage your child is on, and if they're on stage 1, you've got to get clear next about what you control and what you don't control. What I would suggest is just take a piece of paper, draw a line right down the middle of it so that you have 2 columns, and jot down a few ideas here, so that you get clear about what you control about your young adult child's life. Okay, that's going to go on 1 column. I usually like to put that over there on the right-hand side. So just have that right-hand column, what I control. Now, on the left-hand column, you're going to write down everything they control about their life. Let's start with that one. Okay, what do they control? Their attitude. Yep, that's on their side. How they handle respect, cooperation, communication. Yep, on that side. How they handle their anger when they start to get tipped over. Their side. The language that they choose to use. You're getting the point. Okay, so you make a list of all those things on the left. Now let's go over to your side. What do you control about their life? This is where a lot of the parents in my coaching groups, they kind of like throw their hands in the air. Nothing. I don't control anything about their life. Well, okay, pause. What do you control? about their life. Probably, since we're having this conversation, they're still in fairly close proximity to you, right? They may be living in your home still. They've reached that ripe old age of adulthood, whatever that is in your jurisdiction, and they're still around, right? Eating your groceries, living in your home. That's going to give us some clues as to what you control. And here's the shorthand. You control what you provide. You control that. And once your kids hit an age of adulthood, you're no longer required legally to provide all of those things for them. You must be doing it out of the goodness of your own heart. And you are a benevolent, generous, loving parent, apparently. Because the lifestyle that you're providing, the comforts, the services, everything that you provide to them is probably more than what they can afford on their own. Would you agree? And that's why they're still sticking around. Well, you control that. So let's get clear about what you control and what they control, because we're going to need that for the other two steps. Before we get to those next 2 points, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, and if you can think of another parent who could really benefit from this, please share the video with them. As we implement this strategy, the next important thing to understand, and honestly, this is one of the most powerful things that I've learned about working with teenagers and young adults. Detach from the outcome. Put that in your notes. Detach from the outcome. Notice that as a parent, you get pretty wrapped up in what the outcomes are. You really want your child to be successful, be happy, do the thing that you want them to do. We have to detach from that outcome. Why? Which side of the page is it on from our last exercise? Who controls that? You don't. If you controlled it, then we wouldn't be having this issue, would we? Because if you controlled it, it'd be the way that you want it to. Well, it's not. So we have to detach from the outcome because we don't control it. This puts you in a powerful position as a parent. Think about it. When you're detached from the outcome, what happens to your emotional overtones? You start to experience more peace. It's like, oh, I'm good. Either way, whatever happens, I'm okay. This is important because whoever's the most attached to the outcome still has the problem. And if you're more worried about your young adult and his or her anger management issues, then who has the problem? If you're more worried about it than they are, this is still your problem. I'm helping you to detach from that, shift the problem back over to them. So we detach from the outcome, and in doing so, we are now in position to focus our emotional energy on the relationship. That's the second part of this particular step. You detach from the outcomes and you attach to the relationship. Look, your job is to love them, no matter what, and even if. That's your job. If you think your job is to make sure that they get that job, make sure that they're a good citizen, make sure that they are happy, you're going to feel frustrated, angry, and resentful. Those three feelings will be a signal to you that you're getting off of your job. Detach from the outcome. It's not your job to make sure that they anything. It's your job to love them no matter what and even if. Now, remember the list that we made in step 2? There are things that you control, things that they control. When we detach from the outcomes, then it simply becomes an economic transaction. And you agree to control some of the things you're providing for them in exchange for their control of certain things that you don't have any control over, but you kind of care about. It's simply an economic exchange at that point. Hey, I will control this in a way that you like in exchange for you controlling this in a way that I like. It's really up to you. Either way. See, that way you're detached from the outcome. This is powerful. If you can master this, and you might need a little coaching to do that, this will change the dynamic between you and your adult child. Now, I promised you up front that I would share with you in this 4th step what the biggest mistake is that parents make. And it's one that I've done. Lectures. Lectures. We think when our young adult children are getting off track somehow that, oh, they must not know where I stand on this issue. They know. Believe me, I've interviewed hundreds of them. They know where you stand on the things that you're getting all upset about. And it might be being respectful. It might be how they're handling work or employment. It might be how they handle education or sexuality or any variety of other things that you've already taught them about. Trust me, the lectures do not work, and it just irritates and annoys them. You'll feel frustrated, they'll feel annoyed. So let's get away from the lectures, and instead, we're going to set and enforce appropriate consequences. Back to what I shared with you first about the 3 stages. When our kids, regardless of their age, are on stage 1, consequences are the only thing that works. And you don't get cooperation until they move over to stage 2. That comes later. So we have to choose consequences that do not require cooperation. That's why I had you make the list. Get onto the things that you control. And those become the enforceable consequences for the limits that you're setting with your adult child. Now you can see that this will apply to more than just anger. There's a lot of different issues I know that are coming up, but this can be applied in that context as well. You don't control whether they express their anger in certain ways. You can set limits around that and then use enforceable consequences once they make that choice. Let me share with you a quick story that illustrates all 4 points that we were talking about today. This was a young man who was 19 years old, living with his single mother. He was having some anger management issues and was popping off with disrespectful language and yelling and screaming, and sometimes he would break things in the home. This poor mother didn't have control over any of that. She was smaller than he was. In her frustration, she had reached out to me for some coaching, and we went through these steps. She got it. She was making the chart. Here's what I control. Here's what he controls. It was coming together. Now it's time to practice it. One of the things that was so disturbing to her was the profanity that he was using in the home. She didn't like it. It made the whole environment of the home feel uncomfortable and unpleasant. And so she approached him. Now remember, you got to detach from the outcomes. You're okay with whatever he chooses, and you have to have enforceable consequences. So in this case, she approached him, and I was so proud of her. She smiled. Okay, when parents are smiling, kids are thinking, and that's true for young adults as well. She approached him with a smile and said, "Sweetie, I've talked to you before. I'm not going to lecture you about the profanity. I don't like it. It's unpleasant for me, but I'm willing to put up with it for a small fee. Any questions?" And I like that tool. Any questions, right? And he's like, "Whatever." And then he pops off with one of his profane remarks. Well, she had decided that what she controls is the money she had been giving him every week for his lunch. He was working at a construction site and she gave him money. I think it was like $30 a week. And so she decided that any profanity was simply a $5 fee, and she just deducted it from whatever she was going to give him for lunch money. I thought it was brilliant because she was able to detach from the outcome. Hey, I'm okay with either way. I'll put up with it for $5 a shot. No problem. Now it's on his shoulders. See how that shifted it back to him? And it was still hard for him, and he lost several $5 fees during the next several days. But it shifted that dynamic. So no longer is mom yelling and screaming at him. His anger is now on his shoulders to control, and he chose to do that a little better with the $5 fee. That's just an example of how you could apply this as well. Parenting teens and young adults is not for the weak of heart. We've got other resources available for you, including this next video, 5 things that every parent of a teenager should know. Cue that one up next, and we'll help you out.